Welcome to Upside, where we look behind the headlines that affect European venture at the real news, stories, and all the goings on. Today, it is Mads, Lomax, and myself, and we're looking at Slush'd. Mads has just been, Lomax and I haven't, so we're going to ask Mads all about the greatest event for startups in the world, the EU AI regulation rollback. It looks like there's some changes afoot across the EU. Hopefully, they will kill the cookie banner. New UK investment initiatives, which aren't just words and noise. It looks like the UK private and public capital is starting to make some inroads. Germany has a space strategy. Never thought I would say those words. And we got some mega news in AI Corner from Meta, Nvidia, and Google. And I really want to lean on you, Mads, for this TPU insight. It looks really, really interesting what they're doing there. And finally, how everyone everywhere is from somewhere else. Everyone is an immigrant. If we look at the data of what's going on in the States for unicorn founders, what's going across Europe for startup founders, everybody is from somewhere else. But first up, Mads, tell us all about Slush'd and how knackered you must be.
Pretty good, all things considered. I think I skipped the worst or the best of the parties, if you will. But it's a great event, kind of founded about 17 years ago in the cold north. Polar bears are roaming. There was this idea or this insight that Finland really has a bit of a risk-adverse or anti-entrepreneurship culture at that time, back in the 2008s, just around the time of the financial crisis. Some folks might remember it was maybe not. It's kind of a time when there was a company called Nokia that was dominant in this kind of mobile technology.
That was the last year, though, right? Surely, because 2007 was the iPhone. So I'm assuming.
They still had a lot of market share at the time. Yes, the iPhone was getting a lot of course, a lot of headlines. But when you looked at the number of handsets sold, it was still a huge business. But Slush'd was launched kind of as this startup event. It was just a few hundred people to kick off with. And then since then, it's just grown and grown and grown. And of course, Nokia collapsed a few years later, as you absolutely said. The iPhone took over everything. And then you do, and kind of Slush'd turned Helsinki into this, at least for 1 week a year, into this absolute startup hub where tens of thousands of people come from all over Europe and the wider world to look at startups and talk about startups and invest in startups and meet startups, and it's just all startups galore.
It's not as big as Web Summit, is it? Is it still smaller? I mean, Web Summit is 70,000. Oh.
Yeah, I think it's much smaller. I think it's 15,000 people, but it's just all about the startups. It's much less corporate. It's much more about venture.
Definitely juxtaposed with Web Summit, which was last week. It's the week before. And Web Summit is 70,000 people. Started in the same time period, 2009. But Web Summit has become very, very corporate. It feels like an expo, effectively.
It always feels like that's the end point of the startup. They're cool for a period of time, like dating apps when I was a single man. Dating apps were cool for a period of time, and then it became whatever, the mainstream, and so maybe that's the same with the startup events.
I think you have an inherent conflict between wanting to maximize returns as the owner of a conference or events business versus wanting to prioritize like small startups and small fund managers and things. And actually, ultimately, Slush'd is non-profit, no? Whereas Web Summit is run by Web Summit's run for EBITDA. And ultimately, where do you get EBITDA? From the big corporate accounts. Not from startups.
Mads, tell us more. I mean, I've only been twice. I think it's the best. I haven't been for a couple of years, but the best founder-focused startup event I've ever been to is Slush'd.
I think it's superb. I mean, you've got, I think it's some 400, tables where it's just one-to-ones, and all the startups can book with the investors and vice versa. Huge database. You go in and you can select and filter and search and use your favorite LLM to figure out exactly who you should be spending time with. So everybody just books a bunch of meetings, and you can go there and you can have 20, 25 meetings in 2 days, right? And
is it still a nightclub? Is it still that kind of nightclub, cool neon vibe?
I think they've toned the smoke machines and the laser lights down a little bit,
right?
So you kind of your lungs still function on day two, but there is it's still darkness, and it's sort of very the cold Nordics in winter.
I loved it. It felt like inside of Wembley Arena, like a massive, great big dark, moody, black neon lights and all these investors and startups roaming around. I thought it was super cool. Any key takeaways, Mads? Any insights, key takeaways from you?
Listen, lots of things happened. The state of European startups, kind of new reports and insights, and I didn't see any of it. I was so busy meeting cool people, I completely ignored all the official programming and just stayed on the how many people can I meet and have a meaningful conversation with while I'm here.
Fair enough. Also, in quick news this week, I want to actually, Lomax, let me start with you. Germany has a space strategy. We'll go into more quick news in a second, but just to start with, what the heck? Tell us more.
Well, also, it's about bloody time, isn't it? I mean, you would have thought this is 10 years too late. I think it's good. I mean, what is my takeaway? So Germany's just released its big space strategy this week, 35 billion euros of spending, which for context is a lot.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Not insignificant.
I think one of the takeaways here is this is basically by the Minister of Defense and I think Foreign Affairs. So we've talked about it here before, is space in many ways equals defense. And in the sort of new frontier for nation states playing it off against each other will be in space. So this is
I would argue also resourcing. I've always felt when I was looking at what Elon was doing.
What are you talking about mining now? Sorry.
Yeah. I always figured it was mining rights. It looked like, we're running out of all these things. There's rare earths over there. We've got platinum over here and some diamonds over there. And who knows what's on the moon? Made up of the same stuff that
maybe.
The Earth
I think you're getting ahead of yourself. I think yes, but also there's probably lower hanging fruit in relation to that.
Yeah.
But I think this is defense. It's like, we talked about he or she who controlled the oceans, controlled the planet. It's now, I think it's he or she who controls the low Earth orbit or geostationary Earth orbit, whichever one it is. All of it, probably.
So in other words, it's Elon Musk.
Well, yes, with Starlink and for sure.
But this also does lean into the comms piece, doesn't it? Because there has been we've spoken a lot before about how Europe is trying to not rely on Starlink. So comms, defense.
Europe is trying to build up sovereign capability, for sure, in the context of space. But it's a long way behind. It's been caught massively flat-footed. And, unlike a relatively, no longer small, but nimble private company in SpaceX, we have a bunch of, conglomerates like Endurosat or Eutelsat that we have new
all sound very 80s.
I mean, I don't want to down like do Europe down, because we have some great new space companies, right? So the new space economy, including ISAR Aerospace and some great emerging companies, including in our portfolio. But I won't big up my own book.
No, do
too
it.
Much.
No, big the book, baby. We need.
But
Andrew.
Going back to Germany,
he wouldn't be so shameless.
I think the interesting thing for this German thing is that actually it does talk about procurement and partnerships from newer companies. It's not all of the private activity with the private sector is not going to accrue to, the big primes, the big aerospace primes like they have done in the past. So they are willing to push for kind of new independent operators. So I think that'll be interesting. Clearly, it's very hard to go through those procurement programs. So we'll see how that plays out. But big amounts of funding there for sure. And actually, I've been messaging our founders working in New Space today just to kind of get their insights on that.
Interesting.
So I think
we can catch up more about that in weeks to come. Mads, anything that we've missed on Germany's space program?
Yeah. Listen, I think it's great. It also feels like a bit of a missed opportunity at the same time. I mean, obviously, Europe, we're the best one in the world. We're not going to create 5 GPS systems. We're not going to create 7 different, satellite defense systems, right? I mean, we're all too small to fund these massive programs on our own. So great to see Germany investing. It has to be the locomotive. It is the biggest economy. The 35 billion euros is actually more than the European Space Agency's entire budget. Okay, so they're putting real money behind it, or collectively we are not stepping up and investing enough. I would have loved to see the big European countries come together and say 100 bill, right? That we sort of fund jointly, so we can take on some really big missions instead of sort of the piecemeal approach, because we're so behind. There's so much catching up we have to do, and we need to put real money behind it. But okay, so great, fine, 35 bill. It's a nice down payment. Let's go.
It's more than pocket change, dude. I mean, this is a big chunk of change. I think it's a good start, but we'll see how it unfolds. The other thing that was also in the quick news section quite prevalent this week were reports about immigration and how many immigrants there were in unicorns in the States and how many immigrants founders there were across European startups. And the numbers are quite staggering. I think it was Deal Room that put the initial report together that I saw, which basically tracked every city in the States and looked at unicorn founders. And it was somewhere between 50 and 90% of founders of unicorns are from somewhere else, depending on the city that you track, all the way from New York up to the Bay. And there was another report about UK, the highest performing or the fastest growing UK businesses, around half of the founders there were also foreign borns. I don't know what to make of this. I just thought it was quite interesting. But Lomax, was there anything else that caught your eye on the immigrant side?
No, I mean, many people have actually been investing in this thesis for years, and that, as you can see, the data shows this now with 44% of US unicorn founders foreign born, and 54% of UK's fastest growing 100 companies are foreign born founders. I mean, immigrants tend to have moved, in the case of the US, for example, or the UK, immigrants tend to have moved to that country to create a new life for themselves or to build a big business because they were perhaps constrained before. They had lack of access to capital or lack of access to talent or lack of access to the rule of law, whatever it may be, in their home countries. So I don't think it's anything new, and it's not surprising at all. I mean, I was actually surprised the numbers aren't even bigger, quite frankly. The big outcomes come from the really, really, really hungry people who are willing to take that leap, move to a new country, start a new life, people operating at the frontier in all aspects of their lives.
Obviously, if we get a reform government in next, this is not going to marry to their policy, is it?
Well, it may or may not. It depends on what you do in terms of skilled immigration. Because if you still enable windows for that, and the US, despite, in a way, if the way you tighten, if there is a tightening of immigration, in a way, you're making it harder for founders to try and hack the system to try and get in. For example, in the US with is it the H1B? H1B visa, where they've now put $100,000 price tag. There are other visas. There's the O1 visa, for example, that you can hack your way through to get into the US. What
does
smart.
O1 mean? What's an O1 visa?
The O1 visa, you have to meet 3 of the following 8 criteria. One relates to show that you've been issued distinguished awards, show that your membership of distinguished associations. I don't talk my own book, but Outside Ventures, we invest in European founders moving to the US. So it's just like these are immigrants as well. They may be moving from one westernized economy to the other, but still, they're still immigrants and economic migrants in a sense.
I think everyone should do a DNA test and work out that everybody is from somewhere else and just all get over ourselves a little bit. But Mads, anything very quickly before we move on from immigration?
Yeah, I'll try and pick up on what you talked about and maybe try and give an attempt to connect the dots a little bit. Because on one hand, yes, so more than half of the UK's fastest growing companies are run by founders born abroad. I mean, I got to give pause, right? I mean, Lomax, you said you're surprised it isn't more. I mean, that is a lot. That is a staggering number. You kind of 3 to 5 times overrepresentation compared to the level of immigrants in the country. And at the same time, Dan, as you're saying, reform is leading the polls, and voters have immigration as top of their concerns. And I think the design challenge we have as investors, as a business community, is how can we create a system where we can attract that amazing talent while addressing the genuine backlash that we've seen from a mass of low-skilled immigration, where sometimes you find people with values that are incompatible with what we have here, right? That aren't necessarily here and us drivers and driving and building companies and all that stuff. And so, maybe one way to think about it is we've got to recalibrate our immigration system to a point where we no longer have such a strong backlash against immigration, so that we can, again, embrace and welcome all the great skilled migrants that are going to go on to build great companies, because we need them and we must have them. And the challenge, I think, is because we've been a little bit lax around immigration. We've let ourselves get into a position now. I think this is something you've talked about a few times, Lomax, where there's become such a backlash against immigration that we've risked throwing out the baby in the bathwater and all the other good stuff. And this is what we have to fix. And I think there are signs that the government has finally woken up to it. And we've seen sort of Shabana Mahmood, she's proposed some new policies that actually tries to distinguish between what is the type of high-skilled migration that we really want to attract and actually make it even more attractive for people to come here and have a fast track to citizenship, etc., versus maybe other types of migration that actually are maybe not going to contribute so much to society.
I don't know why we haven't. I mean, I know that she's copying a lot from your homeland, Mads, isn't she? She's looking at the Danish laws and regulations, but I don't know why we don't do the Aussie point system, which seems to pretty much work. I think it still does, as far as I can gather.
Don't forget the point system is a system for attracting a lot of migrants, right? That's the idea. Is if you have a genuine skills shortage and you want to attract a lot of people, you have a point system because there's an open system. As long as you qualify in points, you can come to the country. And maybe that's the right thing to do. But I just think right now there is such a backlash against immigration.
Yeah, skilled migration is down. And actually, in a way, the more that the UK sits in the relative turmoil that people think it's in, it's actually struggling to attract very, very high quality people because it's not seen as a welcome place. But one thing also to bear in mind is that, the UK is a centre left government. I sit here in Portugal, which, has always leaned a little bit left. And they've just passed, as of the last couple of weeks, a new rule on foreigners, which have massively tightened up immigration laws here. But, look at Germany, look at France, look at Austria, these countries are skewing and will likely skew a lot further to the right. And so it's going to be a defining moment for our age, in the next decade. And how do we, as a small sector, even though we have, big GDP aspirations or big aspirations to move GDP, how do we kind of navigate and stay relevant and actually make sure we are still attracting the best people from around the world to come and build big companies? Is absolutely key. And, for the science and technology ministers in all of these countries, they're going to have to be pretty thick-skinned to try and encourage the, home office in whichever country it is to actually make sure that there is a broad enough window for high-skilled immigration.
It feels like there's some sensible noises. It feels like they are aware. And also, we're going to talk about later.
It's basically it's a baby baby with the bathwater kind of issue, isn't it?
But it also feels like very easily fixed. It feels like high talent, high skilled labor, especially in tech, innovation, AI, which are on the forefronts of the brains of people in government. It feels like a relatively easy thing, which doesn't become a political hot potato because you're not bringing in thousands of people to go and, I don't know, pick tomatoes on a farm. These are, a lot lower, less numbered kind of people coming in to build smart techie things, he says. Anyway, hopefully sense will prevail. But I want to very quickly in the quick news section talk about defence IPOs because something has been happening across Europe. Lomax, what is going on with defence stocks?
Well, look, defence stocks are, very soup du jour at the moment. We know since the Russian invasion of Ukraine or the second invasion or whatever you want to call it in early 2022. Fact I was looking is that the European Defence Stocks Index, the Stocks Aerospace and Defence Index, is up this year, higher than S&P 500 and the Nasdaq Composite, which we know has been exploding with AI. So clearly, I guess they were coming from a relatively low base, but it's been an amazing run in the public markets. And so there are a range of relatively old school kind of OEM type defense companies that make tanks and ammunitions, etc., and infrared sensing devices, etc., that are looking to IPO and take advantage of this. The PE multiples of these companies are staggering. I think, Mads, you've got some data on that, no?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, some of the companies that are already, public, you've got the ThyssenKrupp, they have their marine systems, which they've just spun out, and that surged 35% on the debut here last month. You've got the Renk Group, which is a tank gearbox maker. They're up more than 200% since they were listed last year. You've got Exosun, which is a French night vision goggles company, also up more than 130% over the last year here. You've got a pipeline of new companies IPOing. You have CSG from the Czech Republic. You have KNDS, which is a tank maker. and making the Leopard and the Leclerc. And you've got just so much, as you say, so much happening in this space.
But the PE multiples are insane. And actually, let's not forget, these are relatively low EBITDA margin companies. These are 10 to 12% EBITDA margin, probably 5-6% kind of free cash flow margin companies. Like these are not like high margin tech companies with big growth rates. I also wonder, like, again, no investment advice, but isn't this a short? Like, isn't it like, these are all old, this is like old defense. This isn't like Anduril or potentially Helsinki, which has aspirations to be an Anduril. A world where these guys are building the stuff that we don't need anymore. These guys are, training the horses in 1914, aren't they? Isn't this
governments won't buy it, Lomax?
They won't buy what? They won't buy the Anduril product?
No, I'm saying it doesn't mean the governments won't buy the horses.
No, of course, no. No, but it means yes, I know. In the short term, but I think in the mid to long term, nobody wants tanks anymore.
Of course, that's why that's why we're all tech investors. Of course.
Yeah. I still find it extremely disheartening that we even have to have this conversation about, gearboxes for tanks and machinery to go and kill people. But I'll park.
Someone's got to defend your democratic, your democracy, Dan.
I knew exactly where you were going to go with that. Anything else in the quick news section? I saw that Vinted is doing something. What's going on with Vinted?
Secondary sale. I think is an 8 billion valuation. Vinted. I mean, the thing about Vinted, which is a Lithuanian marketplace, was basically dead in 2015, 2016. I think that the lesson, and then I think FJ Labs maybe sent one of the investors sent a CEO and turnaround CEO, an operator to go in, who's now turned it around. I think is it 10 billion GMV now, 1 billion revenue.
I know that somebody bought Depop, somebody bought the competitor, and it's not gone as to plan. But Vinted seems to be
Vinted's an absolute beast, and it's in Lithuania. Yeah. So it's a shame Yoni wasn't here from the last 2 weeks ago. I mean, Vinted is a real Baltic success story, and it's also a reminder.
Vinted is at 8 billion. It is 50% of the total value of all Lithuanians' ecosystem.
Wow,
that's crazy.
It's still on a bit of a tenor, isn't it? So that pie will grow. But Vinted, it's a reminder that building big companies takes a long time, and also building big companies can be non-linear, much as we would like it all to be.
Timing is that's the other thing. I think
sometimes you just need to stay in the game. And execution.
There has to have been, that old John Lennon quote of just stay around long enough for luck to find you, right? I mean, there has to have been maybe a COVID factor or some other factors that were kind of lever points.
That's my approach to venture capital, but that's for another conversation.
Just stay around long enough to annoy enough people.
To get lucky.
I want to talk about the UK because there have been, and at time of press, it's now...
Before we go there, can we talk about about cookies? Because actually I thought that's probably the most interesting bit.
Yes!
Are they dead yet? Just tell me they're dead and I'll be happy.
They're not dead yet. But the Commission has proposed a new digital omnibus bill, which is a massive regulatory climb down. Basically admitting that the GDPR cookie enforcement created worse outcomes than the problems it solved. And it's a single legislative package. Yeah, well, there you go, right? That is combining delaying the AI Act plus GDPR changes, plus cookie law reform. So it's a massive package. It's been proposed now. It could take years before everything is passed through the system, but it is a massive, massive change for the Commission. Now, the Privacy Brigade are screaming murder. You've got 127 organizations calling it the biggest rollback you could have imagined, saying it's a capitulation to big tech interest. And yes, of course, we should acknowledge there's some concerns and privacy is important, but it's clear that we have to do something here. You cannot become the best at making things by being the best at restricting things. And until Europe again starts becoming the best at making things, we're just not going to make it in this newly hyper-competitive world. So I think this is a big, big step.
I also can't believe, I mean, I've seen recently that Meta has again been changing their terms and conditions of usage. I just can't believe that the horse hasn't already bolted. So if you're on Instagram, you've pretty much sold your soul. If you're using any big tech, you pretty much sold your soul, even if you are in Europe. So it feels quite a sensible thing to be a little bit more on the American side of this one, rather than keep trying to fight the good fight of restriction and control. I think it's possibly too little, too late. But let's talk about the UK.
Do you think I can access Google Maps through Google Search, or is that still not going to let me do that? I'm still going to be blocked from doing that, no?
I don't know.
Incredibly
You'll have at least
annoying.
93 banners pop up, and by the time you got through that, you'll probably be at the wrong destination.
What a giant waste of time all of that was as well then.
Well, you could argue
It kept
it was
a bunch of people in
time.
Brussels and in law firms in gainly employed, but bloody hell.
It was of
What a
a
fucking waste of
moment in
time.
time. Yeah, really. So UK, lots of noise. As time of press, so we are now Friday late afternoon, 4:30 UK time Friday, and there has been a number of stories in the press that I don't believe have made the levels of noise that they deserve around how much private and public capital is being pumped into the UK. So 25 billion in private investment led by two 10 billion AI growth zones in the North and South Wales. We've got a sovereign AI unit now backed. I think it's backed by James Voize, is it, from Balderton? 500
chairman.
million
He's
pound
not backing
fund.
it, but yes, he's the chairman.
Sorry, yeah, no, that's right. That's it. Yeah. So this is a fund, half a bill to support British AI firms. The BBB, the British Business Bank, has confirmed that they've got NatWest, Aegon, and M&G into a 200 million pound growth fund. We're looking at a 137 million pound strategy focused on using AI for drug discovery. 250 mil into the AIRR, sound like a pirate, AI research resource procurement to deliver compute. Equinix 3.9 billion compute investment in Hertfordshire. Grok 100 mil, AI Pathfinder 150 mil. I could go on. It feels like, and I don't know what's PR, what's noise, what's real, what's meaningful, what's not, but to have all of this come into the news cycle this week. I mean, I know that we've got the budget next week, which we are not going to talk about, but this feels real. This feels meaningful. I mean, Lomax, do you want to kick this one off?
Yeah. I mean, it's all over my LinkedIn. So, I mean, as people are pushing this out to in at least some domains. Look, with all of this, you need to sift through, because there is an element of rehashing of old news. But so there is an element of that.
Which the
AI
Americans
sovereign unit was
do
established
gloriously.
earlier this year, for example, right? So this is not a new thing. But the new $500 million or pound investment scheme and James as chairman are new news. There is a bunch of new news here. And it is a good combination of public and private investment here. Let's just step back. In January, the government produced, or Matt Clifford, who was then working at Number 10, produced the UK AI Opportunities Action Plan, which had 50 recommendations, which were unanimously adopted by Keir Starmer. They had a bunch of recommendations relating to, making sure AI does not become, and I think it does not become an AI taker, it becomes an AI maker. That was the tagline. And there are a bunch of recommendations around compute, around talent, around investment. This is one of the sort of sub-announcements or pieces of execution underneath that plan. So in a way, many, many government plans get, announced with big fanfare and then nothing ever gets done about them. So it's good to see that actually things are being done under this plan. And we had a bunch of announcements made in July, and we now have more made now across a bunch of different areas. So one is this concept of AI growth zones. So an AI growth zone is a sort of geographically designed area in the UK where the government is creating a special regime to accelerate, build out of large scale AI infrastructure. Effectively, it's an area where you build a bunch of data centers.
It's not a free trade zone. It's
not a free trade zone.
AI capex. Okay.
It's an AI growth zone. It sounds cool, but it also ties in. So it's very marketable, but also ties in with the government's kind of pushing out, economic growth to the regions. So there's actually been 2 growth zones already announced, and now there are 2 more, one in North Wales and one in South Wales. Effectively, it's a bunch of data centers and compute infrastructure. So that's great. It's what we need. As part of it's a core tenet of Matt's plan.
Should it be regionally focused, or is that just?
I don't think it matters. If you have a data center in North Wales and South Wales, I think it's great.
Right,
like,
okay.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
I'm assuming the coast is the answer here, as in they need to be near the sea. I don't
think it's a coastal thing, but I think it's like, let's go to a place where there's a bit more space. They are part of the point of these AI growth zones is that, we get rid of all the things the NIMBYs are worried about. So we cut all the red tape, we speed up planning, we make it easier, etc. So I think that's really, really good. Then you've seen the AI sovereign unit, which was announced back in July, but now has, James as chairman and has 500 million to invest in compute sovereignty, which I think is great. So basically investing in like UK chip startups, which is, they're pretty few and far in between, but hopefully there'll be more of them off the back of this. And then we have mainly US private companies now investing and starting to put down roots in the UK. So Perplexity is opening an office in the UK. Grok is announcing its first data center. SoftBank and Graphcore. Remember Graphcore?
Yeah.
Yeah, are doubling down on hiring now in the Bristol area. So look, I think this is really good. In Matt's plan, there's going to need to be a series of these announcements over the next 2 years to actually both announcements and then delivery. In a way, we can watch the delivery over the coming 6 to 12 months. I think it's good. Numbers are still quite small. I mean, there's 135 million announced for AI, for drug discovery, which kind of caught my attention because it's sort of, in the one hand, it sounds like a lot of money. But then I suddenly remembered that this week, Profluent in the US, which is working on programmable biology, raised $106 million Series B or C. Like as in a way, like what we're doing here in the public sector is like the US is already doing it, already in the private sector. Without
Into
the need
one
for these
business in one segment in one section. Yeah.
But that's fine. We need to sort of.
I thought it was big
one
news.
Foot in front of the other.
It felt. I mean, I don't know if it was meant. All these news stories were meant to come out at the same time.
Well, of course they are, because the budget's next week.
But it deserves more airtime. I think. I think if this was in any other country, it would be much more of a fanfare. But Mads, anything on this before we move on to China?
I think the hardware advanced market commitment is super cool. 100 million put aside for the government to say we're going to be the first customer of some of these chip startups.
This is very cool. That's a very good point.
That I agree with.
Yeah. It's just like that. We need no more grants.
Yes.
Need customers. We need contracts. So I think that's awesome. Yeah. Just so we're not all sitting here being cheerleaders. The plan was announced in January. We're now nearly in December. If we want to win, we cannot move at this glacial pace. There's nothing in this plan, I think, that could not have been announced in March.
Why do you think it wasn't?
Because I just don't think His Majesty's government is operating on the timescales of this AI revolution and on the acknowledgement of just how far behind we are compared to rivals in the US and China.
Well, let's talk about China. The other big flurry of news stories was about China. It was based on a quick review of the Busan summit, which was about de-escalating tensions between the US and China. And then there was a lot of opinion pieces about how this folds back into Europe. So Chinese perceptions of Europe are what we would think them to be, that it's too regulated, that we are too slow, and all of the things that we talk about incessantly week on week. But Mads, tell us more about how Europe is perceived through Chinese eyes and what these stories all mean connected together for us.
Well, so taking a step back, I think what we saw in the last few weeks was definitively the marking of the change or the heralding of a new world order, where it now seems clear that China is America's equal. Trump, he tried to be very bombastic and kind of slapping tariffs on the Chinese, right? It was almost sort of a fever pitch of what China could do. And so the tariffs were slapped on. And Xi then moved very quickly on the rare earths restrictions, something they haven't been willing to do to quite this extent in the past, quickly forcing the Trump administration to back down, to offering concessions. And what China did was merely they postponed the licensing requirement around these rare earth exports for a year. So it's not that they've reversed the scheme, they've just suspended it or postponed it for a little bit. So they've really forced these supply chain control levers they have to force a U.S. policy change in a very assertive way, much more than I think we've ever seen before. And this is a new world order. Like, make no mistake about it. And we just have to acknowledge that, I think, as a continent. Now, what's happening elsewhere. I mean, we've seen, obviously there is not a Cold War, but a bloody war on Europe's Eastern Front, right, with Ukraine and Russia. Russia could not have maintained that stance and that assault if it wasn't for collaboration with China. And actually, China has installed ammunition production lines in Belarus. They're producing shell casings there. They have Chinese engineers supervising the production at 2 facilities. So this impacts the European security situation directly. Now, I'm not a big fan of the China bashing. I think we've got to acknowledge that there is a new world order. China is a formidable economic and technological and manufacturing and military power, and we just need to organize ourselves accordingly.
But surely we need to work out where we fit in a multipolar world.
Well, we spoke a bit about, I think we've talked about that previously, and I think the only chance we have now is because we're not coming from a position of strength. It's clear that the Trump administration is not like the transatlanticist administrations of old, and they're very much about America first and Europe, maybe not even second or third, but somewhere down the line. You've seen in the last 24 hours the peace agreement they're trying to foist on Ukraine, which almost amounts to surrender. Right, so it tells us something about what's at stake and how important it is that we move right back to the point we spoke about before at a different level of pace than what we've been able to do in previous decades. You go back to 1940, 1941. But if you took 11 months to get from a 31-point plan to actually announcing some initiatives under the plan, I mean, the war would have been lost. You can't move at this pace. And we are just at risk, I think, of being squashed between these two behemoths of China on one side and the United States on the other side if we are not moving with far more sort of vigilance and speed.
Well, the UK and Europe seem to be making the noise about moving at speed. I'm with you on the actual glacial rate.
We're growing 1% a year, Dan. We're struggling to reform public finances. We're talking about a budget coming up in a week, which offers seemingly nothing but tax rises, no real reform. I don't know where you see this speed.
Spain is the fastest growing economy in Western Europe, which is basically driven by tourism. That's the
interesting.
US is growing at 3%. I mean, half of it's driven by AI, but I mean, literally one's driven by AI, one's driven by tourism. Does that tell you enough?
You look at, well, I'd rather have the AI bit, not at all costs.
I know you like sangria, but still,
I do. But if you strip out the Mag 7 or any of the AI related businesses from the S&P, obviously the growth rate halves. I'm very wary of looking in rear view mirrors and Europe bashing, because it is also fair to say that anything is going to take time. Any policy change is going to take time to show in the figures. And I'm hopeful that there are some meaningful changes that will make a difference. And I think we have to.
Listen, I agree with you. I just don't want us to be cheerleaders, right? And I think it's perfectly fair to say on one hand, yes, great, right direction. Now let's move faster.
Yeah.
We can want it to happen, but it needs to happen faster.
Let's look at some of these things, because
just quickly, by the way, Dan, sorry, before we go into that.
Yeah.
Did you guys listen to Palmer Luckey spending 3 hours with Joe Rogan? I would encourage that. Two, there's many takeaways from that. But one, as a reminder, Palmer is obviously founder and CEO of Anduril, which is now valued at $63 billion. It's like doubled from it's crazy.
He was the old Quest guy, wasn't he? He wasn't the Oculus guy that fell out of
the Oculus from his bedroom, basically, and sold it to Facebook. And then he got fired from Meta for donating to Trump. Like how things have changed. And all those tech guys were at Trump's inauguration. Don't forget that.
I saw him being rinsed by, who was it on the All In? Was it Jason Calacanis that he absolutely took to pieces for giving him a hard time and taking the mickey out of him? And he took him to task, and it was all in relatively good humor, but it was he holds no punches, does he?
He says two things about China. He says two things. One is he says Anduril internal is that they think the Taiwan invasion will be 2027, but I think that's because they can't really afford to be caught out. Second one is hang
on, isn't 2027? Isn't that a meaningful year for China? Isn't there some connection between that year where everyone thinks it's going to happen because of that? Historical.
Lucky's argument basically is that the internal problems will become so big for Xi that he needs to do something like something like this. And also his sort of thinking is, look, we're a weapons company. We can't get caught. We can't get caught out. So it's better to overplan than underplan.
Is he talking his own game then?
No, I think he's just like he wants to be prepared. But yeah, maybe. Secondly, is he said that the whole of the Chinese, I mean, maybe this is hyperbolic, but the whole of the Chinese maritime fleet, like civil maritime fleet, is already like integrated into the Chinese war machine. So it's ready to be mobilized at any given time in a way that no one in the West has actually like set up their civilian fleet like
wouldn't be
that,
surprised.
merchant
I
shipping
wouldn't be
fleet like that.
surprised. I've seen that. I mean, it was only relatively recently they were doing all the training exercises, inverted air commas, around the strait. So yeah, I would have no doubts that that's true. Interesting. Well, let's stay with AI and bits and pieces. It is time for AI Corner. So, lots in the docket this week, Mads. We've got cookies out, AI regulation out, Jan LeCun out of Meta, TPUs in, GPUs out, Nvidia earnings report in. But at time of press, the whole of the stock market is taking a bit of a meltdown. Just a little bit on the Nvidia revenues. They were looking at Q3 57 billion, which has beaten estimates. Data center sales, 51 billion. Blackwell chip sales off the charts. Huang says GPUs are all sold out. So loads of ins and outs. But Mads, where would you like to start on AI Corner?
We've already talked about the digital omnibus bill in the EU. Probably don't need to go into that in more detail, but I just thought a few things worth picking up. First of all, was a super interesting study from Tim Tungus and his team that have been looking at hundreds of AI companies to figure out how do they actually build, what models do they use, and what is the approach they take. And so I think this was corroborated by data from Andreessen that basically says that 70% of AI companies are using the open source models from China in production.
Yes.
Okay, so this is massive, right? I mean, this is just kind of you've got the hyperscalers, of course, working closely with the frontier labs in the US and building these incredible models as they are. And then you've got the free open source models that are taking now 70% of next gen AI company market share. That's massive. This cannot be overreported enough. I mean, this is just huge. So I thought that was worth dwelling on. We've already seen in the last few weeks, Anysphere, which is the company behind Cursor, they basically switched from using Anthropic for their workload to using a derivative of one of the open source models.
Did they switch? I thought they just added it to the library.
Yeah, but I think the way they've added it is in a way that sucks up 70% of the workload that's coming out of there.
Right. Well, they're matching the market, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that's super, super interesting. Now, at the same time, the frontier labs are not slowing down. Another massive piece of news coming out this week was Google releasing Gemini 3 Pro. It's trained entirely on Google's own TPUs, which is the tensor processing units, which are Google's own in-house alternative to Nvidia GPUs. And it's the first frontier model to be trained entirely on TPUs, and it's really, really good.
Aren't they supposed to be something crazy like 200 times faster than Nvidia chips or something nuts?
Well, so the reports are that they achieve a cost performance that's 3 to 4 times better than Nvidia's chips.
I must have read something. I saw something that was 200x. I was like, that can't be right. But it was like, it's a step change, isn't it?
Look, Google has been working on this for more than a decade. I think they're on 7th or 8th generation. So they have really been digging deep. They saw this early, knew exactly where they were going with deep learning, and then they pursued it. The new Gemini 3 model has been winning 19 out of 20 of the benchmarks it's been tested on, beating GPT 5.1 from OpenAI and Anthropic's Sonnet 4.5. So it's a terrific model. Anthropic has turned around and committed to using TPUs going forward to train Claude. And Meta has been signing a $10 billion deal with Google Cloud for TPUs. So there's really some shifts happening here in the GPU and TPU market. At the same time, of course, we've seen Nvidia having another blowout quarter. Revenue was fabulous. Guidance was strong. They've got a phenomenal pipeline. I think they've got 500 or 600 billion worth of backlog already sold, right? Contracted into the future. Gross margins are still high. This has been the thing we've been looking out for, right? What is, the competitive pressure would say that as competition ratchets up, Nvidia is going to lower prices to fight back, and that's going to put margins under pressure. We've seen none of that yet. Gross margins are at 75%, right? So they are super, super strong. And I suspect what's going to happen here is that we're still well away from commoditization.
Really?
Yeah, 18 to 24
Feels
months.
like it could be quick.
And demand is so high. Okay, they can't produce this stuff quickly enough. They're sold out until the end of 2026. They've sold the entire production capacity.
Yeah, I think if you look at the efficiency gains, you look at OS, you look at this TPU delivery, do you not think there are arguments that this could be a relatively quick down, no, not mega, fall off the face of a cliff, but this feels like Nvidia might lose its crown sooner than we thought?
They've sold out everything for the next 5 quarters. Right? So as we get closer and closer to the end of 26, we're going to log out for 2027 backlog. But what I'm saying is you're not going to see it in the next 1 to 2 quarters. Yeah, because they've sold out so much capacity ahead. Like the demand is just...
Keep dancing, kids. Keep dancing.
Is my sense. Now, as we talked about last week, we've seen some wiggles in the stock market. Obviously, this is not investment advice. Always do your own research, yada, yada, yada. But my sense is, again, you're having a bit of a risk-off period as opposed to, anything other than that. I mean, Nvidia clearly crushed results this week, and the underlying business is still very, very strong.
Yeah. Even though, as I've said at time of press, the market is semi-melting, but yeah, maybe it's just a little bit of a cooling off, as you say. That's super exciting. Anything else, Lomax? Anything from you? Any reflections on AI Corner before we move on to Deal of the Week?
It's always my deal of the week, because it's German company this week. Voize with a Z. It's raised a $50 million Series A, led by Boulderton, after onboarding 75,000 nurses for their AI tool. So this is quite a boring kind of AI voice-based platform helping frontline health workers, particularly in nursing homes.
What do they do?
Capture and manage patient information, as well as automate routine, workflows, documentation, and communication. It's healthcare ops, basically, in nursing homes and care homes.
Needs to be done.
The website is in auf Deutsch, so it's still clearly a German. Interestingly, it's a German market play only at the moment. But clearly, Boulderton see beyond that, because they wouldn't be giving them $50 million probably just for that. So I suspect a move to the US will be in the offing at some point, or the UK.
Good for them.
So good for them.
Loving
it's
it.
A big look. A $50 million Series A is not to be sniffed at.
No, a nice chunk. Let's see some more of those, please, Europe. Gents, thank you so much. Love and goodness. Anything else that we should have talked about? Anything else happening this week that's magical? Anything else going on?
No, next week is Thanksgiving, which might be about the only 2 days in the year where the Americans are working, a little bit less hard than us in Europe. So that's
quick. Let's catch up. Let's do it.
Exactly.
While they're not looking, we can go there. Well, as always, what a gift. I will catch you both next week.
Goodbye, guys. See you in the next one.
Upside.